This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's May 9th, 2025. On this day in 1934, the Tennessee Supreme Court ruled against the wishes of a prominent Nashvilleian in a decision that marked the end of his time on top. Luke Lee had old money from an old family. He could trace his lineage back to Nashville's founders. And in his own time, Lee exerted his own brand of power and influence, swagger and self-confidence. In college, he was a star player on a storied Sewanee football team. He founded the Tennessean newspaper and was its editor, publisher, as well as owner. He was a U.S. senator for a short while, a young one. He donated a massive amount of land to the city to become a park named for his father-in-law, Percy Warner. He was very good friends with both the governor, Henry Horton, and the darling of the city's financial world, Rogers Caldwell. Now, Caldwell's bank used what he considered to be an innovative and creative system of intertwined investments to make a lot of money. Today, we'd call it a pyramid scheme. Those weren't illegal yet. And clearly, from Caldwell's point of view, it was a genius way to rake in the cash. And one of the things he did with that money was to partner with his buddy, Luke Lee, to build a portfolio of newspapers across the South. Their other good pal, the governor, also put a bunch of state money into the investment mix, including bond issues that got a lot of favorable press from Lee's Tennessean, encouraging readers to buy those bonds. It was a very tangled web. The web unraveled after the 1929 stock market crash. A lot of people and businesses, and the state of Tennessee, lost their money. Lee's collection of newspapers all went out of business or into receivership. There was a lot of talk about official or legal sanctions for the three buddies, but for the most part, they got away with few ramifications beyond just losing a lot of money. Except, that is, for accusations of bank fraud coming out of North Carolina. It's too complicated to explain here, but when one of the institutions involved in the pyramid scheme failed, the two people from that team who prosecutors were able to pin things on were Luke Lee and his son. They stood trial, were found guilty, and then tried to appeal. Those appeal attempts went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which refused to hear the case in April of 1934. And finally, on this date, the High Court in Tennessee ruled that Lee could be extradited to North Carolina to serve a prison sentence there. A year after his release, and after his hero's welcome when he came home to Nashville, an audit exonerated Lee. He was retroactively pardoned. He died less than a decade later. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with that historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. You know, sometimes news comes in clusters of similar stories, and this week we have been absolutely dripping in court cases. The really big one, of course, was a verdict in the state trial of three former Memphis police officers who pulled Tyree Nichols over in a traffic stop and then beat him so violently that he died from the injuries 3 days later. The jury found the officers not guilty. I know a lot of people are shocked by that verdict. Shocked, but also hurt, angry, confused. The jury was shown video of the beating. It's intense, overwhelming. So how could they rule not guilty, right? I'm actually not surprised. Because remember, acquittal doesn't necessarily mean the jury thinks people are innocent. It can mean that they have enough doubt that what they saw in evidence rises fully to the level of the particular criminal charges they've been asked to consider. And from what I could see of this trial, especially reading along with the daily live blog updates from the Commercial Appeals website, the defense attorneys managed to present a case that seemed profoundly different from the picture painted by the prosecution. And sometimes that's all it takes, making the jury feel confused about who's telling the truth, who's presenting an accurate scenario, too confused to be able to settle on a guilty vote. Now, those officers have already been convicted on separate federal charges. The federal court held off on sentencing until this case was finished, but soon we should find out what their punishment will be. Speaking of federal court, we also had drama this week in the ongoing trial of former Tennessee House Speaker Glenn Cassada and his alleged partner in crime, Cade Cothran. I've talked before on this podcast about how the two are accused of running an illegal kickback scheme. Well, last week, the prosecution played audio for the jury of an interview Cassida did with the FBI. And it's kind of a doozy. Cassida kept changing his story about how much he knew or how closely he was involved with the company at the center of the scheme until he finally came clean about a couple of details, that he was aware of Cothran's involvement and that he got commissions from the company. Well, it turns out they played a portion of that audio that had previously been deemed inadmissible. The defense asked for a mistrial because of that. Both sides spent a while making the case for either starting the trial over with a new jury or continuing to move forward with this one. And on Wednesday, the judge decided what was played wasn't problematic enough to be a mistrial. Another note about that trial. Going into it, a lot was made of the likelihood that the prosecution would call current House Speaker Cameron Sexton to testify, but the state rested its case on Wednesday without bringing Sexton to the stand after all. In the midst of all that, another name from the same era of the General Assembly was back in the news, this time getting a guilty verdict from a Nashville jury. Jeremy Durham was expelled from the State House in 2016 after a variety of claims related to sexual harassment and sexual improprieties. Then in 2022, he got in a wreck in downtown Nashville that injured the other driver. From that incident, he was charged with DUI, reckless endangerment, resisting arrest, and unlawful possession of drug paraphernalia. And that's the trial that just wrapped up. In it, jurors were shown video of Durham in a clearly impaired state, rambling, laughing, hinting that he was actually sober, and questioning whether officers really needed to use handcuffs, making sure they knew that he was a former state representative after all. Amid those ramblings, he admitted to having a small amount of marijuana, but said it wouldn't be a big deal. He name-checked the city's district attorney, Glenn Funk, in a "he knows who I am, just wait and see" kind of way. He told the cops they didn't need to bother because his case would surely be dismissed. It wasn't, and now he's been convicted on all charges. And there's one more case to talk about, another guilty verdict that involves the DA being brought up by someone who got in trouble for doing something they shouldn't downtown. But wow, is it ever different. Remember the multiple white supremacist rallies that happened last summer? Well, one of them was held by an anti-Semitic group called the Goyim Defense League. One of their members was arrested and charged with aggravated assault for beating up a worker at a downtown bar. And so, of course, as DA, Glenn Funk played a part in the legal response. Well, after that, a Telegram user in Texas named David Aaron Bloyed posted a photograph of Funk with the caption, "Getting the rope," and an emoji finger pointed at Funk's image. A second post that, honestly, I just don't want to describe here, made it crystal clear, in case there was any doubt, that this was a lynching reference and that he thought Funk needed to be targeted. The jury found Bloyed guilty of one count of communicating a threat in interstate commerce to lynch and kill Funk. In just a few minutes, it's wildflower season in the Smokies. That's coming up after the newscast.
The justice system is complicated. I'm Paige Flager, and as WPLN's criminal justice reporter, I'm constantly asking, is the system working? And who is it working for?
The system is broken. I think it's more punitive than anything.
And this is not about justice anymore. This is about vengeance.
We're trying to get justice from a justice system that failed us.
How policies impact real people. Hear their stories here on WPLN News.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Nashville families impacted by a series of ICE raids in the past few days still do not have concrete answers on where their loved ones are. WPLN's Miriam reports that families and lawyers fear what's being done behind closed doors.
Less than 48 hours after ICE began arresting and detaining drivers in Nashville's immigrant corridor, Ingrid Martinez's mom was taken into custody.
I didn't know that after 5 minutes of barely being with her, I wasn't going to be able to see her anymore.
Martinez says her mom had only been detained for an hour when agents said she was already in Louisiana, where ICE has a bigger detention center.
My mom isn't a criminal. My mom, she serves a church. She takes care of her grandkids. So I don't know how she can be seen as a criminal.
Turk lawyer Alan King says he's concerned that those detained may have already waived their right to a court hearing without knowing what they were signing.
Individuals are being asked to sign away their due process while in deplorable conditions. One individual detained on Saturday, who was later released, shared with us that in the room that he was in, 20 people were packed inside with only one toilet and no privacy.
ICE did not respond to a request for comment about the conditions of its facility. Mariana Baca-Yao, WPLN News.
Tennessee is scheduled to carry out the death penalty this month, executing a person for the first time in 5 years. WPLN's Catherine Sweeney reports some victims' rights advocates are arguing capital punishment is not the best use of state money.
Family members of murder victims spoke on behalf of the group Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Here were their ideas.
What my family needed was counseling.
Statewide, half of all murder cases go unsolved. Tennessee spends millions of dollars to pursue executions while hundreds of Tennessee families continue to wait for their loved ones' cases to be solved.
I sit with mothers who are grieving while trying to keep a roof over their heads, find counseling they can't afford, and guide their other children. These families are not sitting around thinking about executions.
It's difficult to pin down just how much an execution costs. Tennessee has spent $600,000 on lethal injection drugs since its last execution. There are the less direct costs, like court proceedings, that are more extensive for death penalty cases. In Ohio, legislative researchers estimated an execution costs between $1 and $3 million. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
The Tennessee Department of Correction is scheduled to execute Oscar Franklin Smith on May 22nd. Governor Bill Lee has been asked for a reprieve, and there are several lawsuits challenging the state's lethal injection process. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has arrested a Middle Tennessee State University professor on multiple charges, including theft and retaliation against a student. The state comptroller's office, which helped with the investigation, says Don Hong encouraged his students to donate to the school's accounting program, then put their donations into his own bank account. He's since transferred at least some of the money to the university. Hong is also accused of using a fake identity to lease apartments to international students he recruited. When a student reported him to the university, investigators say he used another fake identity to falsely accuse the student of academic misconduct. The relationship between Nashville and the state legislature has been fraught for years. 2 years ago, laws targeting Metro prompted multiple lawsuits. But has the tide begun to turn? WPLN Cynthia Abrams reports.
Metro's manager of state affairs, Darren Jernigan, describes the latest legislative session as a success. One indicator? Nashville has gone 2 years without suing over a state law.
What I get from the sense of the General Assembly is that they're ready to move on from any kind of this punishment of Nashville.
Jernigan says this has enabled Metro to step out of defense and pursue its own agenda. This session, the city advocated for certain bills on affordable housing and taxation and pushed for state public safety funding.
We need each other, and we're 1/3 of the income for the budget of the state.
Relationships have shifted too. Jernigan used to be a lawmaker, and Nashville's mayor talks often with the governor and House Speaker.
We're probably going to disagree 70% of the time, but when we don't agree, we will talk to each other ahead of time.
We certainly did see some troubling bills.
And this is Mayor O'Connell. Metro did not go unscathed this year. Early on, legislators made it a felony for local officials to vote for sanctuary city policies. City lawyers are reviewing it. Another bill would have gutted local oversight of historic buildings. It was eventually dropped, but only after Metro preemptively reorganized its commission.
There are times when the fight becomes about, do you want to lose everything or do you want to get partial victories?
And while Nashville did not see as many targeted bills this year, Memphis did. One, which was put on hold until next year, would have overhauled Shelby County's school board. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Tensions between city and state officials have flared up in recent days over the dozens of people being arrested and detained by federal immigration agents. Gender-affirming care will not be covered by the health insurance that Wilson County Schools offers its employees and their families. That's after a unanimous school board vote this week. The Wilson Post reports the district is self-insured, which means the board has a direct say in what is and isn't covered. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The most diverse collection of wildflowers at any national park is now in bloom in the Great Smoky Mountains. The Appalachian Mid-South Newsroom's Jackie Sieber paid a visit to learn more about what makes this season so unique.
Smell that right there. Just give it a little whiff.
Oh.
A little smell.
On a cold, misty morning in a wooded area just outside Gatlinburg, park botanist Ian Sabo walks up a hill festooned with colorful wildflowers and blooming shrubs. The trees towering over the plants are bare. He bends down to examine a 3-petaled white flower with a berry pink center. It's about a foot off the ground. By its smell, he identifies it as a sweet white trillium.
It's got just these really wide, broad, overlapping petals. I think that really kind of gives that one away.
This little trillium is one of over 1,500 flowering plants that are found in Great Smoky Mountains National Park.
I mean, we have, plants here in the park that don't grow anywhere else in the world. So it's pretty neat.
The wildflowers usually bloom in mid-April, then go dormant in the summer months. Sabo says these flowers have specific scents that are meant to attract certain pollinators.
The red trillium, another common name for it, is Stinkin' Willie. So it also, some folks say it's kind of reminiscent of wet dog, but it's not a very appealing smell.
Sabo spots a yellow trillium near a flowing creek. He pulls out his phone to take a picture and catalog it with the iNaturalist app. It's used by millions of people and scientists around the world. With one picture, the app pulls up suggestions of what it might be.
Who knows, it might pop up in a sec. There we go. And it's like, hey, it's a trillium. It's trillium. Luteum is visually similar, expected nearby. So it's basing that on the location data with the photo. And then also giving Trillium cuneatum as an option.
The nonprofit Discover Life in America has an office just on the other side of the creek. Executive Director Todd Witcher says they started using iNaturalist to document all forms of life at the park about 3 years ago. Since then, they've added more than 200 new records.
And so we try to encourage people to look for some very specific things we're wanting to know more about or where it is in the park. We basically mine the data from iNaturalist to add to our inventory.
Inside a small office decorated with pictures of wildlife and plants, Will Kuhn sits at the end of a long table. He's the Director of Science and Research at Discover Life in America. Kuhn says the app helped them discover more about how pollinating insects interact with certain plants, like the grass of Parnassus that blooms in the summertime.
We had volunteers that went out with us for a couple of years in a row and documented a bunch of new pollinator records for them.
Visitors can download the iNaturalist app to document wildflowers they come across at Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Just be sure to take time to smell the flowers, like the lemony scent of a yellow trillium that's similar to Pledge furniture polish.
It's okay to smell the flowers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just don't want anyone picking the
Pledge.
flowers, right? But
Yeah.
smelling the flowers is fine.
For the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom, I'm Jackie Sieber.
That story was produced as part of the Appalachia Mid-South Newsroom. That's a collaboration between NPR and several public radio stations in West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who have left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up next week.